Welcome to In a Nutshell, the podcast dedicated to all things agricultural consulting. I'm Dylan Brush here with soil genius and ag consultant Bill Brush, and we're delighted to accompany you on this journey where we break down the different aspects of agricultural consulting. In each episode, we'll dive into the realm of agriculture through the eyes of Bill Brush, where consultants like Bill play a vital role in empowering farmers, agribusiness, and agricultural organizations. If you're passionate about agriculture, problem solving, and enjoy a little bit of detective work, this podcast is tailor-made for you.
Welcome back to In a Nutshell. Today I want to talk about something near and dear to me, which is the unbelievable amount of misinformation we get fed through media, through sources, through everyone trying to sell a product, everyone trying to dispel a product, every time trying to say I don't like people in agriculture or people in agriculture are great, whatever. And we get fed what I call information that gets adjusted to provide a narrative that I want you to think is true. And there is some thread of truth to it, but at the end of the day, it's only to make you confused so that you don't really know what's going on.
Bill's going to start off his conversation about misinformation by talking about water.
So what I mean by this is that, we live in California. Anybody outside the state is probably faced with this at some point. There are several places in the U.S. where water is essential to your livelihood. If you're growing crops, you have to have water. It's not like a huge statement. That's just reality. But everybody's after your water. Like, you can do without it. And we know we can't as farmers. Me as a consultant, I've seen things. I've worked, in several places across the U.S. and other places around the world. And water is the staple to grow things. It's amazing where I've been that you'll see just a little tract of land out in the middle of nowhere, and we'll see somebody cultivating it and growing crops on it because it's got water. And yet I'm sure all of you have heard at some point, and take your own situation for what it is, and you'll say, agriculture uses 80% of all the water. Yeah, it does. But it uses 80% of not the total water, but that's the way it's stated. Agriculture takes up 80% of the water, and 10% of the water goes for, we'll call it urban use, and that could be some manufacturing. But most of the time we're talking about housing, where people live, and it could be businesses in town and anywhere else. But it's, inside where people are out. So ag's using 80%, and the urban's using, just 10%. Well, you're taking two different things and blending them, because 50% of all the water that's, say, in our state, from rain to the reservoirs that store it, to the water coming down and stored and melted from the snow melt, all up and down the state. 50% of all the water is generated in the state is from the rivers, evaporation. The lakes that are stored with water are evaporating. The rivers are evaporating. We need to have a certain amount flowing all the time in our state here in California to hold back the salt intrusion at the delta. That's our point where we have to have a certain amount of water flowing out all the time. And we have to allow for that. Or salt becomes to be coming backwards from the ocean inland, and all of our wells become salty, high sodium, high chlorides, unusable for ag, unusable for drinking water. So we have to supply that. So if you think of it this way, 50% has to be taken away. And what's that leave? The other 50%. 40%, in other words, of the total volume is for ag. And 10% is for the urban. Well, we've diminished the urban to talk about 10% of 100%, but we only call it 10% a lot of times when we're talking about 50% of the water. So if we take, this is a crazy math equation, but if you take half the water and you're taking 40% of that, that's 80% of the water that's left. After you take the 50% off the top and you've got 40 or half of what's left, 40% of it makes you having 80% of the usable water, The rest of it's going to go. It's going to be evaporated. It's going to go down rivers. It's going to the delta. You have to hold a certain amount back. Everything all that happens, floods, it runs out to the Golden Gate Bridge here because all the Central Valley heads that way. So on the other side, that's only really 40% of all the water, not 80, but yet we always hear this 80% number because we're trying to tell you how agriculture takes so much of the water. But what about the lakes and rivers and streams that you go fish, or you go in and you boat on the lakes and all that, and everybody uses it for recreational use, and then also to make sure that your water doesn't get too much sodium in it. And we need all this stuff. So 50% of the water is going to do all that. Of what's left, then ag will get 80% of it, or 40% of the whole volume, and the urban will get 10%. Or 20% if you're really looking at it, of what's available. But what nobody wants to include in this is how much do people use? How much do people use? Because plants, of what they take up, a good example is we have a mechanism in plants, and this is a thing that never comes into the water use. They just see all these crops use way too much water. They're wasting water. They're using too much. Most all of our water that goes into a plant, somewhere between 95 and 99+%, is transpired. The plant holds on to a very small, tiny amount for its functions. It's only keeping somewhere in the neighborhood of about 5% to as low as 1%. Of the water it takes in is all that it keeps. The rest is transpired. What's that mean? Well, we take water into the plant, and we form leaves or green tissue, the stems and as well as the leaves, and we do photosynthesis, which is taking, the sunlight and extracting carbon dioxide, which is really valuable to humans. The day we have no plants, we will soon be with air so foul that we won't be able to tolerate it. And so that'll be the end of civilization as we know it. There might be something survive, but but not be like anything we see. So it transpires. What that does is it takes in carbon dioxide to its leaves and stems and turns that into glucose, into sugar. And it uses water that it's using there, but the rest of a lot of that water then is returned back in water vapor and also oxygen, which enriches our planet with oxygen to overcome the excessive carbon dioxide and the carbon monoxide that we produce, and we're able to pull it in through plants and turn it into something valuable for both of it. So if we're not transpiring the water, we're not going to be also supplying oxygen back to the atmosphere. So it's a balance that is scientific, it's nature, but nobody ever talks about it. They just said you wasted because you use too much water. If we don't use the water, we won't get transpiration. And so we need that not only to grow food, but also to enrich the environment with oxygen and also putting water vapor back in so that we don't have a dry air, which means that water vapor gets back into the clouds and is moved and then is reformulated into rainfall somewhere, and conditions are right, it drops it again. So it is the master recycling of pulling carbon dioxide out and putting oxygen back in, taking this water vapor going up and putting it back into our clouds, which then get heavy enough in right conditions, it basically comes back to us as rainfall again. Very, very natural, but yet I hear it all the time, and I, after a while, get quite sick because nobody wants to talk about what actually is happening. Rather, they want to talk about something that you're using too much because you're big ag, you're big this, and your wastewater, take up way too much. You're taking 80% of all the water. See, look what you're doing to us because you're not having enough water for your own use. Or your water meter is costing you a lot of money, and if you had a lot more water and ag didn't have water, then we would be just fine. That's not the case. We build more and more, and now we've kind of balanced off here in our state. But it was approaching around 40 million people, and now we're down in, and I'm just going to take it down, say it goes down to 35 million. Okay. With 35 million people in the state, and you can take some children off, and we're probably in this range, and it's not, some will use more, some will use less, but the average usage for people in the state of California is 2.8 billion ounces per day. And I think gallons is more easy to understand. 21.875 million gallons of water per day is used by humans in the state. I'm not even considering livestock, which is a whole nother issue. Just humans alone. And your crop may go dormant, or you don't have a crop growing, so you're not really using water. But people, we use it every single day. You give up a certain amount of water is expired, which you basically, guess what? You're like a plant. You are putting it back into the atmosphere, water vapor coming out. You take a little bit of loss of water from your body, goes out in your breath. Then there's a certain amount that you sweat out to cool your body temperature and keep it into normal range. Obviously, high heat can dramatically be 10, 20 to even 22, 23 times the amount of water will be lost on a highly physical day in hot heat, and then you're going to lose about not quite a half a gallon probably per day of water in your urine. So here you have that a little bit more in your stool, but altogether this is what adds up to about 80 ounces per person. You do the math, and that's what you come out with. Farming takes water, and no doubt about it. You can't grow plants without water. So what's the value of your crop? Do you have trees? Do you have landscape? Do you have lettuce? Do you have, lawn? Do you have flowers? Do you have bushes? Do you have a garden? It all takes water to do that. What's the value back? There's a lot of value back to it. A lot of people say, well, they shouldn't have this. They should get rid of all that. It has a tremendous also advantage and a positivity to, guess what? Putting air, oxygen back into the atmosphere and basically transpiring water vapor back into the. But if it comes down to you or your lawn, you guess what's going to lose? You're going to give up your lawn. You'll go to something that's artificial, and you'll have enough water for your own home use. We cannot survive as people or animals without a constant amount of water all the time. Same amount we need it every day. Not we dehydrate, and that just leads to physical problems and all other kinds of things. The other thing I hear about is, which also drives me a little nutty, is that we are exporting our water. We're growing these crops and we're exporting the water to other states, because as the number one ag state in the United States, we export a lot of our crops, not only to other states, but we export it out of the United States to foreign countries all over the world, because we are a food producing nation. And as I said, farming takes a lot of water, but look at the things we're producing. But everybody wants to pigeonhole everything into a one size fits all. You're shipping water. Well, if you get to, and I'm not saying we are the only thing that happens, but if you've got an almond, a walnut, most any nut crops, you're down somewhere between 5 and 10%. 5% for a lot of the dry nuts like almonds, pistachios, and pecans, and about 10% for walnuts, because they're a little bit have a little bit more water, which needs to be dried back down. But before we'd ever ship them, we want to stabilize the water or the moisture that's in there so it doesn't go rancid. So we start with about 10% and want it, and it'll go down a little bit less for that before we ship. So not a lot. So if you're shipping a ton of something somewhere, and about 5 or 6% of it's water, so at 5%, you're shipping about 100 pounds of water, right? 5%, yeah. Okay. If you're shipping vegetables, that's 95%. Lettuce is about 96% water, okay? But it's a very fast-growing crop. Matures a lot of times somewhere in 100 days to 120 days, somewhere in there. A lot of crops are grown 3 times a year. You'll actually rotate out and plant on the same property and grow up 3 different vegetable crops in a year. Whereas an almond crop will only produce 1 crop per year. It takes a long time to grow an almond or a walnut or pistachio or a pecan, or a peach or an apricot or a cherry. All of these things take lots of time to go from flowering to pollination to growing it up to maturity to harvest, and then it goes dormant. Because most all of these that I'm talking about are what we call deciduous, which means they lose their leaves and then they go dormant and then they start up next spring, late winter, early spring, and grow a long growing cycle. One of the reasons that we grow, I hear this, it drives me nuts too, we're monoculture. Monoculture. All you do is you just grow 1 crop. You just grow 1 crop, And yet, it's one of the few places in the world that you can have the right climate to grow almonds. It's a reason that they don't grow very many in Europe. There's a few places on the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, Portugal. They're not as good as we are here in the valley. They have one specific segment down in Australia that's got them. China has tried for years to create a growing region for almonds and has been unsuccessful. So it's unique to this area, The last time I checked, we're monoculture, I guess, because we don't grow pineapples and we don't grow bananas and we don't grow avocados and we don't grow a lot of those things in the Central Valley here. You know why? Because they don't grow here well. But we are in a place that grows the best almonds because we have water and we have climate. We are have to worry about maintaining enough water. So we are doing a better job. We're growing more almonds and using less water per pound on almonds, which is understanding our place, conserving water to a point, but it doesn't do us to do any good to conserve all the water and not have any crop. So we're getting better and better at that. The other thing is, when you're shipping fruits or vegetables, fruits, a little less more solids. They have a little more solids and less liquid, but they're still 80 to 90% water. Vegetables are 90 to 95% water. So the other thing that you get is because of that, when you have things like dry fruit, or you have something like an avocado that takes 16 months to mature from flowering to the time you're going to harvest it, what you can do with that additional time is make more nutrient-dense crops. You've got more protein. You've got more fat. And they're plant-based fats, which is the good kind of fats. You've got more sugars and carbohydrates, minerals and vitamins. How much do you think you're getting in your fruits and vegetables? The fiber's great. A lot of those nutrients are essential that you're getting in our fruits and vegetables. But because they're so high in water content, what you're getting in a shipment is not near the same number that you're going to get when you get dry fruit or dry beans or dry grain, because you have little or no water content. So what you're getting is higher in proteins. You'll get grains that are 16 to 18% protein. What do we need in our diets all the time? More protein, because we're going for, one of the things that we get in our diets is meat production, whether it be beef or lamb or chicken or turkey or whatever. And the key thing that we need in our diet from those is protein. When you go away to a vegetarian type diet, what do you see people eating? Oh, nuts, dry beans, because that's where they got to get their protein. It's an essential part of your diet, It's easy to get carbohydrates. It's easy to get sugar. It's easy to get, one of the things I look at sometimes, and if you just eat lots of lettuce, you can get a lot of water through that, because it's 95, 96% water. And so you literally are drinking water when you're eating your lettuce, eating your salads and whatever. And it's not just lettuce. I use it because it's what people would relate to probably the easiest. But it's no different if you're looking at all the rest of those leafy greens, and it could be collards, it could be even things like bok choy or whatever. High water content. And I don't make the numbers up. I just look at those people that research it and do the math and run them through the universities and says, this is what's in these, this is where they're at. We need to be symbiotic between people that are in town. You need to understand more where your food's coming from, what it takes to grow food. You don't like paying a lot more for food, but as things come into agriculture, as water becomes more expensive, food has to go up in price. The free market will tell us how much that will be or won't be. If we can't make enough money with that, the first rule of sustainability is I can't grow it anymore, because I can't grow it here for years and lose money, or I'm the thing that goes away. I'm the farmer that goes away. We all need to be recognizing, but we also need to recognize your needs. We want to give you a good, nutritious, solid amount of your fruits, vegetables, nuts. You can take, if you're vegetarian, beans, all the way down through this food cycle. Or if you're not vegetarian, also the beef, the chicken, the lamb, the turkey, whatever those are also important, that we give you the best nutritious amount. And we do it in a way that's what we call sustainable. We make a reasonable profit, and at the same time, we provide you with something that you need that's essential to your life. We need also clean, fresh water. We need clean, fresh water to grow the best crops. And we have to find and adapt to ways to be able to use our water the most efficient. And if you looked at a lot of the technology that current ag use, is unbelievable to when it was when I started. We just guessed. Quite honestly, we'd look at our plants, we'd look at our soils, we'd do some probes and say, it needs water. Nothing like we have today with the technology and the probes and the ability to fly over and take, with drones and find out about how much light's being emitted. So it'll tell you how dry things are and where the drier parts are in your field and how you can make your water be the most efficient. Everybody gets better and better at it, because it has to be that way for sustainability, but it also has to be that way so we are the best stewards of water anywhere that we can be. There's lots and lots and lots of technology that we keep implementing. Why? If it can help you make more money, be more profitable, that's the easy way. But if it also saves us water so that in times of drought, we're able to maintain yields to a good level, and you're still able to have the volume of water you need for yours. So we work together. I think too many times, this country came from a very, very ag-based business. It used to be lots and lots of farmers for every person that wasn't a farmer. Now, it's lots and lots of people more than for every farmer. And what that's amounted to is that means that every farmer is feeding more people. He has to be in business for us. It's very important, too, if you understand, and most of us in ag, we're not high proponents, but we understand the necessity of regulations, but we want to be on a level playing field so that the food and fiber and everything you're getting outside the country should be of the same quality, standards, and safety that we produce here. We just want to be met with an equal competition of being able to do that. When I was, younger, much younger, we did not have a constant supply of table grapes, a constant supply of fresh peaches, nectarine, apricots. We had the season. So they would come in, everybody run because everybody loves fresh stuff. They'd bring it home, they'd either can it or they'd cut it, freeze it, all kinds of things that we did because we knew it'd be a long time before we got back to that. It's what created the canning industry. A lot of people began to go away from their actual working themselves, and they could go to the store and buy apricots or peaches or whatever. And so what we got away from was people don't do that anymore. They buy a lot more. And ag's been slow to change. We're still trying to grow good canning varieties that don't have much use in this country. So all of these things are evolving. We need to listen to you, the customers that are consuming the products. What is it that you're looking for? And listen to us. Here's what we are doing, and here's what we can do for you. And we're trying to listen and give you the best quality fruits, vegetables, grains, meat, cheeses, all of the products that ag produces. We want to give you that. And we want to stay in business to do that. We have no guaranteed set that we make money every year. We don't get a wage. We get a price paid for the commodity that we produce. And we always have to look at all the things we're looking at here today and talking about. We don't have control over that. I can tell you that when we have a huge wet year here in California and the rivers run full, we balance it all out, we lose 2 to 3 years of storage of all of our reservoirs, go right out and out to the ocean because we have no place to hold it, okay? And yet we have some places where we get a lot of resistance, and I understand it's both sides of you have to be on both sides and understand both parties so that you can reach an agreement. But we need more storage. And once you've got a dam on a river, you've already created that as something, and there's value in that. I mean, people that like to recreate in lakes and go to the lake and fish and water ski or just hang out. There's a certain amount of vacation and recreation that's wonderful that can be taken from that. But we can't overdo it and change the entire environment by just putting and holding everything back. So we need to be in balance, have enough for what we need to do to create a good environment for farming. Because been around, if anybody that's listened to many of my podcasts will know, I've been around the world. This is the greatest farming area I've ever seen. And across our United States is probably the biggest and most effective farming country anywhere in the world. Well, let's not forget that. That's our powerhouse. That's our secret weapon to be able to supply food at the best quality and the best quantities so that you can remain healthy. And I've spent most of the latter part of my career, the last 30 years, helping people get better balance into their soils. So not only do we make bigger crops, we make better crops. They are higher in nutrition. We're getting all the vitamins and minerals into these, and we need to keep working in that direction. And I will do that for us probably as long as I feel I can still go out and do it. I'm kind of off on a rant today. You're going to probably find me about once every 4 or 5 podcasts, go off on another one as I see something that I think people get confused by. I'm sure that everybody's told me, oh, your almonds use a lot of water. I can't believe how much water they use. What did I tell you? 95% at least goes back to the atmosphere. The almonds didn't use it. They used it for their biological functions to do that. Also, when they get done, it's 5-6% water in these almonds or almonds, whichever you prefer to say. And yet, lettuce doesn't use as much, but of course 95% of the water that's still in them is, guess what? Still in them. And it's transpiring at a high rate too. And so I'm not downplaying that. We need all these different foods. We need our fruits and vegetables. It's not their fault that they're high in a percentage of water. That's the marketable part. But let's not downgrade everything without knowing the full story, We jump to conclusions. We jump to an answer that fits a narrative that we like to hear, rather than looking at and actually talking to someone that does this for a living, has been in this all of his life or her life, and has real answers for you. And we'll talk about it. Ag never professes to be perfect. I don't profess to be perfect. I just know what we do is an honorable profession, and it needs to continue on because we've needed farmers from the day creation happened. And we continue to build population in this world, so you continue to need to feed those people, and we continue to need to get better at our craft. So that's all the rant I have for today. I'll be looking forward to, hopefully, comment, questions, send them to us here on In a Nutshell. I'd love to be able to talk back more to you about these issues. And until next time, stay curious.
Thanks for another absolutely incredible episode of Agriculture in a Nutshell, Bill. I'm sure that everyone very much so enjoyed your rant on misinformation, specifically as it pertains to water. And for everyone listening, please remember to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and always stay curious.